Stop right now. Maya Bennett's voice cut through the sleek glass conference room like lightning striking steel. The clatter of pens, the faint hum of air conditioning, and the low murmur of executives froze in place. Sunlight bounced off the polished mahogany table, glinting against the gold-plated nameplates, casting sharp shadows across the glossy floor. Maya stood at the edge of the room, her black uniform crisp, apron tied neatly, hands gripping a small clipboard, eyes fixed on Daniel Harper, the CEO towering at the head of the table. Every muscle in her body was tense, yet her posture radiated unshakable resolve. Daniel, 42, in a perfectly tailored navy suit, paused mid-signature, his sharp gray eyes narrowing, a smirk caught halfway across his face as he tried to mask the sudden jolt of uncertainty. The room smelled faintly of leather chairs, cold coffee, and the polished surface of expensive wood, a scent Maya had long associated with high stakes and hidden risks. The air felt thick, almost heavy, like it had been waiting for someone to speak, and now it hung around her like a tangible presence. She remembered the weeks of preparation that had brought her here, the countless hours studying the contracts, the potential loopholes, and the subtle signals of misalignment that others might overlook. Every second of her observation, every glance exchanged between the partners, had sharpened her awareness. As she took a measured step forward, the soft tap of her polished shoes against the marble floor echoed in the near-silent room. Daniel's assistants shifted uneasily, their pens poised, eyes darting from him to Maya, sensing the tension as if the room itself had taken a collective breath. Maya's mind briefly flashed back to her childhood in Chicago, summers spent volunteering at local community centers, learning the value of vigilance and quick decision-making, the lessons of responsibility and courage that had always guided her choices. She had been underestimated her entire life, brushed aside because of her age, gender, and skin color, and yet she had honed her perception into a tool sharper than any blade. The contracts lay open on the table, a labyrinth of clauses, numbers, and signatures that could either secure or devastate millions. She knew the implications if Daniel pushed forward without noticing the glaring inconsistencies she had flagged, and the weight of that knowledge pressed down on her chest. With a calm but commanding tone she said again, "Leave now." And even though the words were spoken softly, they reverberated through the room with the force of inevitability. The light from the floor-to-ceiling windows caught the edges of her hair, coiling tightly at the nape of her neck, highlighting the intensity in her almond-shaped eyes. Daniel's hand hovered above the pen, hesitation breaking the rhythm of his practiced confidence. The partners leaned in, collectively holding their breath, realizing that the ordinary waitress standing at the edge of the room held information that none of them had seen coming. Time seemed to slow, the ticking of the antique clock on the wall almost audible, as Maya's steady gaze met Daniel's, silently conveying the urgency and gravity of the moment. No one moved. The room existed in a fragile balance between action and inaction, between risk and prevention, and Maya, small but unwavering, had become the axis around which that balance now pivoted. Her chest rose and fell methodically, the faint scent of her perfume barely perceptible but grounding her, a reminder that courage did not need to shout, only to stand firm. Daniel's fingers twitched above the pen, the ink poised to mark millions, yet he could not ignore the certainty radiating from Maya, a certainty born from observation, intelligence, and an unyielding moral compass. The assistants, the investors, even the receptionist visible through the glass, all felt it, the palpable shift, the quiet thunder of awareness that the wrong move could cost everything. Maya's lips pressed together, breathing controlled, eyes unwavering, and in that suspended heartbeat, she became more than a waitress. She became the sentinel of reason, the quiet authority that no title or wealth could eclipse, and the room, despite its luxury and power, bent momentarily to her presence. This was a black story, a testament to courage and vigilance, a moment where patience, knowledge, and the courage to act merged into an undeniable force, and all eyes remained fixed on her as she waited for Daniel to recognize the unseen danger she had illuminated before it was too late. The conference room remained still, the air thick with anticipation as Maya Bennett stepped closer to the table, her black shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. Sunlight shifted across the polished wood, casting fleeting patterns that mirrored the tension in the room. Daniel Harper, still holding the pen above the contract, exhaled slowly, his jaw tight, eyes flicking between the clauses and the young woman standing before him. The partners around the table leaned in subtly, pens poised, faces betraying the faintest hints of curiosity and concern. Maya's mind ran through every detail she had studied, the numerical discrepancies, the potential legal pitfalls, and the subtle contradictions hidden in the contract language that could cost millions if ignored. She felt the weight of responsibility pressing down, but it grounded her, each inhale measured, steadying her focus. She had seen similar situations in her past, volunteering in community centers and interning in legal offices, where being observant and decisive made the difference between success and failure, order and chaos. Every muscle in her body remained taut but controlled, her posture unwavering, projecting quiet authority that seemed disproportionate to her small frame. Daniel Harper's assistants shifted slightly in their seats, papers rustling, the soft clink of pens echoing in the otherwise silent room. Maya allowed herself a brief glance around, noticing the subtle cues of discomfort among the executives, the tightening of hands on coffee cups, the brief, almost imperceptible exchanges of glances that signaled awareness without words. The hum of the air conditioning and the faint creak of the leather chairs filled the pauses in conversation, each sound a reminder of the precise moment in which she stood. Her eyes met Daniel's directly, unflinching, transmitting clarity and conviction without a single raised voice. He hesitated, the pen suspended midair, uncertainty flickering across his features. Maya drew a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her lungs and steady her pulse, and she began to speak, not to argue or plead, but to present facts with calm precision, highlighting specific clauses, figures, and potential outcomes with a clarity that made the room lean in collectively. Her voice was measured, each word deliberate, carrying the weight of knowledge earned through preparation and observation, resonating through the high-ceiling space with authority. Daniel's initial irritation softened into a focused attentiveness, the realization dawning that the details he had trusted were being illuminated by someone he had underestimated. The partners exchanged subtle nods, whispers muted but their eyes betraying acknowledgement of the importance of her intervention. Time seemed suspended, the moment stretching as Maya outlined the overlooked points with unwavering poise, her presence commanding respect without needing to dominate the room. She emphasized clarity over volume, facts over emotion, and the silence that followed each observation was deafening, a testament to the impact of her carefully chosen words. Daniel slowly lowered his hand, his breath even, a flicker of humility crossing his features as he absorbed the significance of what had been revealed. The room, once charged with tension and poised for a potentially costly misstep, now carried a different energy, one of quiet respect, measured relief, and the recognition that vigilance, intellect, and courage often came from the most unexpected sources. Maya Bennett's gaze remained steady, unwavering, embodying calm authority and unassailable confidence, and the partners understood that the outcome of the $200 million contract depended not just on the signatures, but on the insight she had brought into the room at precisely the right moment. The room remained suspended in a quiet tension as Maya Bennett adjusted her stance, placing one hand gently on the edge of the polished mahogany table, while keeping her gaze locked on Daniel Harper. The sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows shifted subtly, catching on the gold trim of the chairs and casting a warm glow that highlighted the seriousness etched on every face around the room. The assistants shuffled papers with careful precision, their pens poised but hesitant, the faint click of keyboards in the background blending with the soft hum of the air conditioning. Maya's mind moved rapidly yet methodically, connecting every observation from previous meetings, every clause she had annotated, and every subtle warning sign she had noted about the contract. She spoke with deliberate calm, outlining specific points that had been overlooked, her voice steady and clear, each word measured to convey the magnitude of the situation without panic or dramatization. Daniel Harper's eyes flicked back and forth, processing the information, his usual confident demeanor tempered by the realization that Maya had uncovered potential pitfalls that could impact millions of dollars and the company's reputation. The partners leaned in, murmurs subdued, eyebrows slightly raised as they absorbed her careful explanations. Maya's presence, though small in stature compared to the towering CEO, radiated authority and precision, every gesture purposeful, her movements measured like a conductor guiding the tempo of an unseen orchestra. She referenced prior agreements, timelines, and figures, articulating potential outcomes with clarity, emphasizing the importance of pausing before committing signatures. The room's silence amplified each detail she delivered, the weight of her words, filling the space, drawing the attention of everyone present, and creating an almost cinematic tension that was palpable even in the stillness. Daniel's hand trembled slightly above the pen, his focus completely on Maya's presentation, recognizing the depth of insight she brought that no one else had considered. The sunlight shifted again, illuminating the fine lines of concentration on the faces of the executives, the subtle tightening of lips, and the exchange of glances that silently communicated the gravity of the moment. Maya's confidence never wavered. She allowed herself brief pauses, letting the information sink in, her eyes never leaving Daniel's, silently signaling the urgency and necessity of careful action. The hum of the building, the distant sounds of traffic, and the faint click of heels on the marble floor outside served as a muted backdrop to the intensity inside, framing the moment as one of insight, vigilance, and quiet influence. Daniel finally lowered his pen, exhaling slowly, a flicker of acknowledgement passing over his features, and the partners leaned back slightly, the tension easing but the awareness of the situation remaining, as if the room itself recognized the pivotal moment Maya had created. Every person present now understood that the success or failure of the $200 million deal hinged not merely on signatures but on the discernment and courage she had demonstrated, and in that realization, Maya Bennett's presence transformed from that of an observer to an indispensable guide, commanding respect and shaping the course of events with composed authority. The room shifted subtly as Daniel Harper leaned back in his chair, his eyes tracing the precise markings on the contract, while Maya Bennett remained a poised figure at the edge of the table. The sunlight streaming through the expansive windows, reflected off the glass awards lining the sideboard, scattering faint glimmers across the room that danced like sparks against the muted beige walls. Every sound, from the soft rustle of papers to the faint hum of the central air system, seemed magnified against the tense silence, emphasizing the gravity of the moment. Maya's gaze was steady, her almond-shaped eyes observing not only the legal text before her but also the subtle cues of the executives around the table. The twitch of a pen, the barely perceptible shift in posture, the small nods that betrayed their recognition of her insight. Daniel's breath was measured, a controlled inhale and exhale as he processed each point she highlighted with clarity and precision. Her voice, calm yet unwavering, articulated the implications of overlooked details, outlining potential financial and reputational consequences with a measured cadence that drew the attention of every participant. The partners leaned slightly forward, pens hovering over notepads, a chorus of silent acknowledgement reverberating through the room as they absorbed the depth of Maya's analysis. She referenced prior case studies, cross-checked figures, and subtly pointed out inconsistencies with such clarity that the room collectively understood the weight of what had been nearly missed. The soft reflection of sunlight on the polished tabletop seemed to underscore each word, every gesture, creating a visual rhythm that matched the meticulousness of her reasoning. Daniel's hand hovered above the signature line, a brief hesitation betraying the shift in his internal calculus, the usually dominant CEO now confronted with the necessity of reassessing his position. Maya's posture remained elegant and composed, one hand resting lightly on the table, while the other gestured sparingly to emphasize key points, each motion deliberate, controlled, and impactful. The assistants and executives alike felt the subtle authority she wielded, recognizing that her preparation, observation, and decisiveness had transformed what could have been a routine signing into a moment of clarity and measured judgment. Outside, the faint murmur of the city filtered through the glass, the distant sounds of traffic and pedestrian footsteps serving as a quiet counterpoint to the intense focus within the room. Every second stretched as Maya continued to outline her findings, her calm authority compelling the room to lean in, to consider, to reflect. Daniel's usually assertive demeanor softened, his sharp features revealing a flicker of respect and acknowledgement, a silent nod to the precision and courage that Maya had demonstrated. The room, despite its grandeur and the presence of significant wealth, had become a stage for intellect and integrity, each participant acutely aware that the decisions made in these moments carried implications far beyond the immediate numbers. Maya Bennett, steady and resolute, had shifted the balance, her voice and insight guiding the outcome with a quiet power that required no amplification, only attention, understanding, and the courage to speak with unwavering clarity. Daniel Harper's expression shifted subtly, the rigid confidence in his posture giving way to careful attentiveness as he absorbed each point Maya Bennett presented. The sunlight across the floor reflected in sharp lines along the marble, tracing the movement of papers and the subtle gestures of executives as they leaned closer, nodding quietly in acknowledgement of her insights. Maya's voice remained calm, deliberate, and precise, articulating potential outcomes, financial implications, and the importance of verifying every clause with a clarity that demanded attention. Her almond-shaped eyes scanned the room, noting each reaction, every twitch of fingers on pens, the slight shift of chairs as partners processed the weight of her words. She referenced prior agreements, cross-checked figures, and highlighted subtle inconsistencies that could have been easily overlooked, presenting the information with the authority of someone who had meticulously prepared for every scenario. Daniel's hand hovered over the pen, a tremor of hesitation betraying the internal reckoning taking place, his usually assertive demeanor tempered by the realization that the insights Maya brought were indispensable to the decision at hand. The room's silence amplified the impact of her words, each carefully chosen sentence reverberating with the force of clarity and intellect, commanding focus without raising volume or pressure. The assistants, who had initially been tentative, now shifted forward slightly, silently acknowledging her expertise and the necessity of considering her perspective. The soft murmur of the city beyond the tall glass windows provided a muted counterpoint to the concentrated energy within, every sound in the room from the gentle tapping of a pen to the faint hum of the air conditioning underscoring the importance of the moment. Maya's posture remained composed, one hand resting lightly on the polished wood while the other gestured sparingly to emphasize critical points, each movement intentional, reinforcing the authority she conveyed without domineering presence. The sunlight shifted across Daniel's face, highlighting the slight furrow of his brow and the tension in his jaw, a visible acknowledgement of the gravity of the situation and the clarity Maya had provided. Time seemed to suspend, the room existing in a delicate balance between action and contemplation, as each executive processed the significance of the observations she had laid out. Daniel finally set the pen down, exhaling deliberately, the tension easing slightly as he recognized the value of Maya's intervention. The partners leaned back, the room still charged with anticipation but now tempered by respect, understanding that the decisions about the $200 million contract could not proceed without careful consideration and the insight she had provided. Maya Bennett, small in stature but monumental in impact, had transformed the atmosphere, her vigilance, intelligence, and composed determination reshaping the course of events and establishing an undeniable presence that commanded attention, earned respect, and guided the outcome with measured authority and quiet power. A subtle shift occurred in the room as Daniel Harper leaned back, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly while his eyes remained fixed on Maya Bennett. The sunlight filtering through the tall glass windows highlighted the sharp lines of the conference room, casting geometric shadows across the polished marble floor that seemed to trace the rhythm of the silent anticipation in the air. Maya's posture was unwavering, one hand lightly resting on the edge of the mahogany table, while the other gestured subtly to emphasize the significance of the points she had raised. Every executive around the table leaned in slightly, notebooks and pens poised, absorbing her insights with a growing recognition of their importance. The soft hum of the ventilation system and the distant, muted sounds of the city outside provided a quiet backdrop to the focused energy within the room. Maya's voice, calm and measured, continued to delineate the consequences of overlooked details, the cascading effects that could arise if minor inconsistencies were ignored, her words precise and deliberate, each syllable carrying the weight of knowledge and preparation. Daniel's hand, once hovering tensely over the contract, now rested, fingers flexing slightly as he absorbed the gravity of her observations, a quiet acknowledgement of the clarity she brought. The partners exchanged brief glances, nodding subtly, their expressions reflecting the dawning understanding that the situation had been narrowly guided from potential risk toward careful resolution. Maya's eyes swept the room, noting the attentive expressions, the restrained breathing, and the subtle tension easing in shoulders and posture alike, recognizing the momentary shift in atmosphere as respect and appreciation replaced uncertainty. The polished tabletop reflected the sunlight in shifting patterns, illuminating the seriousness and focus etched into every face, the glint of pen tips and notebook corners catching the light like small beacons of attention. Maya remained steady, her presence commanding without dominance, a beacon of composure in a room previously charged with tension and potential oversight. Daniel's brow furrowed lightly, not in irritation but in contemplation, as he acknowledged internally the depth of insight Maya had contributed, a silent concession to her skill and preparation. The room seemed to inhale collectively, a shared acknowledgement of the pivotal role she played, the careful timing and decisive clarity she provided guiding the room's focus. Outside, the soft bustle of the city went on unnoticed, the distant honk of car horns and murmured conversations fading into irrelevance against the intensity of attention within the glass-walled conference room. Maya's calm, deliberate articulation of risks and outcomes anchored the room, every gesture, word, and glance reinforcing her quiet authority and the validity of her observations. Daniel Harper's posture softened further, a subtle nod acknowledging her input without words, and the room collectively felt the shift, the balance of attention, authority, and respect gently moving to recognize the indispensable role Maya Bennett had played in guiding the decisions before them, the significance of her intervention resonating in the careful consideration of every signature, every clause, and every strategic choice that would follow. The room exhaled collectively as Daniel Harper finally placed the pen back onto the polished surface of the mahogany table, the tension that had gripped every corner of the conference room dissolving slowly into a tangible sense of relief. The sunlight shifted, illuminating the subtle sheen of sweat on foreheads and the reflective glint of glasses filled with water and coffee, casting delicate prisms that danced lightly across the floor. Maya Bennett remained poised, her hands folded lightly over her clipboard, her almond-shaped eyes scanning the room to ensure clarity had settled in every mind, and the partners who had been silent observers now allowed themselves small nods of acknowledgement. Daniel's posture softened, his shoulders lowering as he exhaled, a faint flicker of humility passing across his features, a silent recognition of the insight and composure that Maya had brought to bear. The assistants straightened in their seats, pens lowered, notebooks closed, the subtle sound of shuffling papers the only disturbance to the quiet that now felt almost ceremonious. The air seemed lighter, carrying with it a renewed sense of focus and measured confidence, a shared understanding that the $200 million deal could now proceed with greater security and integrity. Maya's presence, steady and commanding in its quiet form, had reshaped the dynamic, transforming the room from one poised on the edge of potential error to one grounded in thoughtful precision. Daniel's gaze met hers briefly, a nod of silent respect passing between them, an acknowledgement of the careful attention and unwavering moral compass she had demonstrated. The sunlight, now lower in the sky, cast longer shadows across the table, accentuating the careful alignment of chairs, papers, and people, as though the room itself recognized the importance of her intervention. The partners and assistants began to relax into the rhythm of the room, their previously tense postures easing, the slight creak of chairs and soft shuffle of feet filling the space with the first signs of movement and normalcy. Every subtle gesture, the tilt of a head, the small movement of a hand, carried a quiet recognition of Maya's impact, her observation and decisiveness having created a pathway through what could have been uncertainty and miscalculation. Daniel's breathing steadied, a controlled rhythm that matched the renewed pace of the room, his expression softening as he processed the significance of the oversight that had been averted. The sunlight flickered once more across the high-gloss surfaces, reflecting the calm authority Maya projected, and every participant in the room seemed to understand the quiet truth, that intelligence, preparedness, and the courage to act had redirected the course of a moment with potentially monumental consequences. The room, once charged with tension, now resonated with subtle respect, an unspoken acknowledgement that Maya Bennett's calm, unwavering presence had preserved not only the integrity of the contract but also the collective confidence of everyone present, and in that understanding, her influence settled into the room as a lasting mark of vigilance, competence, and quiet authority. Outside the conference room, the hum of the city resumed its rhythm, but within the glass walls, a new energy had settled, one of measured focus and quiet accomplishment. Maya Bennett remained near the edge of the table, her posture still precise, yet there was a subtle relaxation in the set of her shoulders, a slight softening around her eyes that had been sharpened with intensity moments before. Daniel Harper finally exhaled fully, the pen now resting safely on the mahogany surface, his gaze flickering from the contract to Maya, a silent acknowledgement of her role in guiding the proceedings with accuracy and foresight. The partners began to collect their notes and close their laptops, each movement deliberate, Yet their expressions held a trace of awe and respect, as if recognizing that the room had witnessed a rare example of calm intelligence shaping significant outcomes. The sunlight slanted lower now, casting elongated shadows across the floor, illuminating the polished wood and reflecting faintly in the glass of water and coffee cups, creating an interplay of light and focus that seemed almost symbolic of the clarity Maya had brought to the situation. She moved slightly, adjusting the papers in front of her, her hands steady, eyes taking in the room once more to ensure that the critical points had been understood and the potential risks properly mitigated. Daniel's assistants began to exchange quiet words, nodding subtly as if affirming that the contract would proceed with enhanced security and accuracy. The room was no longer tense, but the weight of the intervention lingered, an unspoken recognition that preparation, insight, and courage had prevailed over potential oversight. Maya's gaze swept the room once more, noting the subtle shifts in body language, the unspoken acknowledgement of her role, and the careful recalibration of focus that now allowed the team to move forward with confidence. Outside, the city moved at its usual pace, unaware of the intense moments that had just unfolded within the conference room. Yet the people inside knew that a critical decision had been influenced and safeguarded by vigilance and composure. Daniel Harper adjusted his tie slightly, a subtle gesture of acceptance and respect, his sharp gray eyes reflecting the understanding that the integrity of the $200 million contract had been preserved. Every participant sensed the balance restored, the gravity of the moment acknowledged, and the quiet power Maya Bennett had exercised settled into the room as a guiding presence, leaving an indelible impression on those who had witnessed her calm authority, thorough preparation, and unyielding clarity in navigating a complex and high-stakes situation, shaping the outcome with precision and wisdom that would be remembered long after the immediate decisions were finalized. As the final moments in the conference room settled into a calm rhythm, Maya Bennett straightened her posture, the slight shift almost imperceptible, yet it radiated a quiet authority that had subtly transformed the energy in the space. The sunlight now slanted lower across the polished marble floor, reflecting off the glass water pitchers and gold-accented nameplates, casting delicate prisms that seemed to underscore the resolution that had been achieved. Daniel Harper sat back, his hands folded lightly in front of him, gray eyes softened with a measured respect that was not easily given, his gaze meeting Maya's in a silent acknowledgement of the clarity and foresight she had contributed. The assistants closed their notebooks gently, their movements deliberate, pens set aside as if the room itself had collectively exhaled in relief and appreciation. Maya's presence remained composed, calm and unwavering, each subtle movement reflecting the confidence of someone who had guided a complex situation with precision and careful judgment. The executives shifted subtly in their seats, their expressions a mixture of admiration and understanding, recognizing that the insights she had shared had prevented costly mistakes and reinforced the integrity of the $200 million contract. The light in the room continued to change with the afternoon sun, glinting off the edges of polished wood and glass, highlighting the careful alignment of chairs, papers, and people, each element now symbolically aligned with the renewed sense of clarity and control. Maya's almond-shaped eyes swept the room, noting the softened postures, the subtle nods of acknowledgement, and the quiet attentiveness that signaled the successful transmission of her observations. Daniel adjusted his tie lightly, a gesture of thoughtful reflection, and allowed himself a moment of silent contemplation, acknowledging internally the value of preparation, focus, and the courage to speak with conviction at the precise moment it was needed. The subtle hum of the ventilation and the distant sounds of the city beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows seemed to fade into the background as the room absorbed the impact of her intervention. The partners, previously poised with pens and laptops, now relaxed into the moment, a shared recognition of the expertise and vigilance that had directed the outcome with deliberate care. Every movement, glance, and subtle inflection carried the imprint of the decisive role Maya had played, guiding attention, focus, and judgment without imposing dominance, commanding respect through intellect and calm authority. As the sunlight faded gently, elongating shadows across the floor, the room resonated with a quiet acknowledgement that vigilance, insight, and composure had shaped the course of events, preserved the integrity of the contract, and left a lasting impression on everyone present. Maya Bennett remained composed, her presence a quiet reminder that preparation and courage often speak louder than titles or wealth, and that a single individual, grounded in knowledge and calm determination, can influence outcomes, shift dynamics, and ensure that clarity and integrity prevail, leaving the room not only relieved but inspired by the example of unwavering competence and moral precision.